Grow CFO is where finance leaders grow together. Join thousands of like-minded professionals using Grow CFO to access the combined knowledge and experience of the finance leader community. You can join us today at growcfo.net. Hello and welcome to the Grow CFO Show. I'm your host, Kevin Appleby, and we're continuing today our series about the CFO and the relationship with other members of the C-suite. And in particular, we're going to have a look at the CMO today. And I've got Alan Gonsenhauser here as our specialist from that area. So Alan, welcome to the Grow CFO Show.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm really excited to be here because as a CMO, I've been in marketing and general management most of my career, but I started in finance. I've got my master's in finance, so I've always gotten along really well with CFOs. And I think that relationship is a really important one. So happy to talk about it.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about that relationship. It's the marketing side is one of those things it's often difficult to put an ROI on, and finance people like good hard numbers.
Yeah, I know. Well, maybe let me say a little bit about where I'm coming from first, if I may. I started in finance. I've been actually a CMO 10 times, 7 times in full-time companies, and 3 times as an interim CMO. In the last almost 3 years, I started my business Demand Revenue. It's at demandrevenue.com. I've also been a P&L general manager. And 3 years ago, and I was an analyst for Serious Decisions and Forrester in the CMO Executive Advisory Group. So in my 6 years there, I mentored over 100 CMOs, and I continue to do that in my business Demand Revenue today, either as an interim CMO or a mentor and advisor to CMOs or doing projects with CMOs and their teams. So to get to your question, yeah, I think the relationship is very critical. I think there may be 5 areas where CMOs and CFOs can work together, and we can talk about each of them. One is to change the perception of marketing. Marketing has changed a lot over the years as digital technology has evolved and measurement has become easier to do. And so establishing a common understanding of what modern marketing is and what it can do and the value to the organization in a number of areas, in brand, in valuation, in demand, is really important to do. Establishing a common language, the language of business, I think is important that people speak the same language and create a dashboard. I believe that the CMO and CFO should create a dashboard collaboratively where everybody is comfortable with the KPIs and there's a common understanding of what good looks like. And that really helps the relationship. There needs to be ongoing collaboration between the CMO and the CFO. And I also believe that CMOs need to act like general managers. I mean, that's a quick overview. We can get into each of those areas. But I'm also a big believer in customer-led growth. So when we talk about metrics, the metric that's most important to me, and I have this conversation with many CFOs, are metrics around customer-led growth. I consider myself a customer capitalist. Let me describe what that means. I believe the future valuation of a company is related to the customer base. It's related to a couple of things. Once companies get to a certain point and they have customers, it's related to net revenue retention, number one, and the number of customer promoters and advocates that bring you new business. If you add your net revenue retention and the new business you're getting from customer referrals, that's the value of your customer base. And looking at things like lifetime value of customers and retention and new business from existing customers, that's how you can grow. And I believe those are the most important financial metrics because that will predict your future success versus just looking at metrics in the rearview mirror. Obviously, revenue, profitability, all of those metrics are very important. But the value of your brand and the value of your relationship with customers, things like net promoter score and acting on customer input in terms of what they love about you and the things that you need to change is critically important in growing your business. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. And actually, from that point of view, Alan, we're very much on the same page. I'm always talking and one of the things that I teach in the classroom is KPI dashboards. And I'm always saying that, look, you talk about key performance indicators,
Yep.
not key result indicators. A key performance indicator should be a predictor of what you're going to do in the future.
Yes.
Key result indicator is a record of what you've achieved now and in the past.
Yes.
Everything that has a dollar sign in front of it is not a KPI, it's a KRI, key result indicator.
Key result.
You can't drive your business, as you say, looking through the rearview mirror.
Yes. So when I look at metrics and work with CFOs to develop what good looks like in metrics, and by the way, I've also taught at universities. I've taught like finance marketing classes at a local university in Boston. I'm in the Boston area. But when I look at metrics that are important, dashboard metrics, there are 4 classes of metrics. The first are activities that show how busy marketing is. How many emails did we send out? How many of the those metrics are only important internal to marketing, not to the C-suite.
Right.
Folks don't care. They want to know what are the results? What do you get from it? What are the outputs? So the second level of metrics are outputs, which can predict things like how many demos did you get? How many trials did you do? How many freemiums did you do? How many major accounts that you were targeting with your ABM responded and came back to you? Those are output or result metrics that can be predictive of the next class, which are, as you're talking about, impact metrics. What's the revenue? What's the profitability? What's, net promoter score is probably an output that's predictive also. But those metrics are kind of key results as you mentioned them. And then there's a fourth class. And these are the things that marketing needs. I call them readiness. What are the things that marketing needs to be successful? So the first set of metrics, activity is only internal to marketing. The result or output, the impact metrics, and the readiness are important for the C-suite to see. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. Tell me a little bit more about Net Promoter Score.
Net Promoter Score, the person that started, Fred Reichheld, has been at Bain for 40 years. And he started Net Promoter Score 20 years ago. And it's a very popular metric, often misused metric. That's pretty simple. You give customers the opportunity to rate their likelihood to recommend your brand on a 0 to 10 scale. 9s and 10s are promoters, those that really love your brand and will recommend it to others. 7s and 8s are called passives. They're kind of in the middle. You're not sure where they are. You'd like to bring them over to be a promoter, but they're not a promoter yet, unless they're 9s and 10s. And then 0s to 6s are detractors. Those are folks negative on your brand. So it's important to understand each of those 3 groups. And you always have a question, why did you say that? So the detractors are like gold because they give you specific feedback you can use to improve your value proposition, whether it's product, price. Normally it isn't price, but whether it's product, your customer support, your communication, whatever it is. I've actually used that input to go from last to first at one company that I was CMO of North America at. We were last. There was an oligopoly of dental implant suppliers. We were last in terms of customer satisfaction. And we use that input to get from last to first, putting a cross-functional team together. It's not just marketing, but it's, could be finance, could be how the invoice looks, could be the invoice is arcane to the customer, could be anything, could be communication, could be support, could be product issues. But getting negative feedback is like gold. And Fred, who is the father of NPS, came out with his latest book is called Winning on Purpose. And it's all about customer-led growth. He's actually invested in the stock market and made millions by investing in those companies that get how to love customers. And what he says is only 10% know how to do it right. So this is a book that I would recommend every CEO, CFO, CMO to read and absorb. It's a masterpiece. It's really, really good. Highly recommend it. And in his new book, he talks about NPS 3.0 and a new metric that he's calling earned growth. And this metric is what I said before. It's net revenue retention plus the new business you get from promoter referrals.
So you're measuring net promoter score. Ideally, you should be looking for net promoter score to be increasing.
Yes.
So average number you've got across the totality of your customers is going up. Now, would you be targeting specific customers? I'd imagine that if you've got somebody who's giving you a 1 or a 2, well, you're going to struggle to ever get them up to 7s, 8s, 9s, and 10s. But should you be looking at the 5s and 6s, or should you be looking at the 7s and 8s?
Well, first of all, you should be looking at what your ideal customer profile is. If you're bringing customers on that churn, which kills your gross and net revenue retention, you've got the wrong targeting. And that's where everything ties together. So you want to understand the causes of your detractors and which are controllable. If it's that you're not bringing on the right customers, let's say you've got I have this with one company. They have a very high-end value proposition. They've got wonderful global, huge enterprises, but they also bring on some low-end customers, but they don't have a low-end product or support system to service them properly. So they churn like 40%. And that's killing your brand. And you want to make sure that you're bringing on the right customers. Detractors can be very instructive on what you need to do to fix problems in the future or target new customers better that you'll get the right lifetime value from. But I would say in response to your question, you want to look at those 7s and 8s and see how you can bring them on to 9s and 10s, see what they need. And you want to understand the 9s and 10s to see what folks love about your value proposition. But ultimately, it's important that you also have a clear vision of your ideal customer profile and cross-functional alignment around that, because a lot of companies have an issue with that. You may be bringing on new business, but it's not the right new business.
So bring on new business. Clearly, the marketing folks, CMO, can get a good idea of who those target customers should be, what they look like. How does that fit in with the relationship with the CFO? Where does the CFO play in that space?
There is an economic value of alignment. I was with a company's Serious Decisions that was taken over by Forrester, and one of the founders did a study of 400 B2B companies back, I think, in 2014, but it's still very relevant. And what they found was companies that were well aligned. And when I say aligned, I'm thinking of sales, marketing, product, customer success, finance.
Yeah.
Being on the same page, moving in the same direction. Companies that are well aligned and stay well aligned grow 19% faster and we're 15% more profitable.
Wow.
Across 400 B2B companies. That's very telling. So I think it's critical for the C-suite to be aligned on what customers are we going for and how do we love the customers that we have and keep them happy and retain them and grow them. And it's important that they all move in the same direction. So I think that relationship between the CMO and the CFO is critical to make that happen. Because strategy is not only setting out some clear goals for the organization, but it's also deciding what to say no to. And a lot of companies have an issue with that. They want to boil the ocean. And they may set 10 strategies at the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, maybe you'll accomplish 3, but they wouldn't be the 3 you would have picked if you would pick the 3 major ones. So that alignment is critical.
That's a very interesting thing, the things you should say no to. The idea of saying no, that's an interesting one to me because you can put the strategy document together. It can have all these lovely things that you're saying yes to. But I firmly believe, unless you're very clear about what you're not going to do, then that strategy document just becomes something that collects dust on a shelf. Actually, where I think the CFO's role is absolutely vital in there is the person running the budget process. If you're saying no to things, then you should not spend money on those things. Part of your budget review process should be looking to see where the alignment is between the spend and the strategic objectives.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, I'll give you one funny example. When I look at strategy, I look at, say a 3-year plan a company has and where they want to go in year 1, 2, and 3. And then the annual plan should ladder up to that 3-year strategy, as an example. When I look at annual planning, one of the most popular templates I've helped CMOs with looking at annual planning is a document that's called Marketing Will/Will Not list, to make it clear to the organization what marketing is not going to focus on. Because if they focus on everything, they're focusing on nothing.
I totally agree. If you take that will focus on, will not focus on, if I renamed that with a finance hat, that would be a zero-based budget, justifying everything from first principles.
Yeah.
And remember a position where I was working a turnaround team with my own organization at the time that was in trouble. And sitting down talking to the marketing team, literally going through every line in the budget and saying, okay, we're in trouble. How do you justify that? How do you justify that?
Yeah.
How do you justify that? And getting a very clear list of these are the small number of things that we need to push to try and turn the business round.
Right.
Here are all the things that we can no longer afford in this present climate.
And when you do that, it's important to have both a short-term and a long-term look.
Oh, yes.
Because I wrote another blog, it's on my website, and it's passing in the rain, something like that, in this economic climate, which has a lot of headwinds. What should marketing be cutting? And what should marketing be investing in?
Yes.
And you can cut things like, multiple agencies and content that isn't being used. And I firmly believe that CMOs should do that proactively, not after being asked by the CFO to cut things, but they should always look at what's working and what isn't to the best of their ability. But things like AI, which is obviously, and ML, which is something that everybody should invest in because the whole world is moving to that, but also customer success and loving your customers and making sure that you support them properly and understanding who is coming to your website, those anonymous visitors, technology that will show you that. Since only about 3 to 5% max of website visitors ever fill out a contact us form, most visitors are anonymous. So you want to have intent data on those that crowd your website because that shows intent, and those that are looking for solutions like yours. And if marketing isn't and CFOs aren't investing in that, you're going to lose over time. So there are certain things you should invest in, even in a downturn, but you can cut other things. So making those choices together is really important. That's why the relationship between the CMO and CFO is really critical.
I think there are 6 or 7 levers that you can work on the back of growing the business. And if you can move each lever by 10%, you can make a big difference.
Yeah.
First one is suspects. And suspects to me is all of those people visiting your website.
Yes.
Second one is prospects. Those people that actually did click something and fill a form in. Third one is then customers themselves. But then if we can go on and look at the retention, value per customer, lifetime value, all of those things, I think you've got another thing you can move. And then there's your referral one. Well, there's 5 levers that we can pull. Pull each of those by 10%. Compound effect could be 50%.
And there are other levers too. You could look at what regions you're operating in. You can look at what departments or you're marketing to. You've got M&A as a potential lever. You have new products. And then you have productivity, one that's often not thought about. And that's alignment. Yeah. All of those can help you be more productive and more profitable.
Okay. Going back to those 5 strategies that you gave me in the book, started talking about changing the perception of marketing. What's the CMO going to do around that? Is that entirely the CMO that needs to do that? Or do the rest of the C-suite need to be on board changing the perception as well?
I think the C-suite need to be on board, but it's up to the CMO first to communicate that effectively and develop relationships with the C-suite. Actually, on my website, demandrevenue.com, com. Similarly, you're doing a series on the relationship of the CFO to all their peers on the C-suite. I did the same thing with the CMO. So I looked at CFO first, CHRO, CTO, CSO, etc. Depending where people have been from and the experience they had, some people view marketing as arts and crafts or sales support or a cost center and not a growth engine for the company. That's all changed.
Yeah.
That's all changed. CMOs can be the convener in chief. They can be the chief customer officer. They could even be a chief growth officer. And they've been that in B2C. And that's, I think, coming to B2B as CMOs assume more of a chief customer officer role.
Yeah.
So marketing has changed. The metrics have changed. The strategies have changed. The technologies have changed. And I think it's incumbent upon organizations to have a view of what marketing is today, not what it was in the past.
And interesting, you say that you could perhaps take call the CMO the chief customer officer or the chief growth officer. I think you can do the same with the CFO, that the CFO is increasingly becoming the chief value officer.
Yeah. It all depends on the company. Every company is different in the culture.
What you see across the C-suite is the widening of everybody's role.
Yeah.
And therefore, there has to be some element of overlap.
And collaboration.
Collaboration, which is the flip side of that. You've got to have people working together, people on the same page. So you're talking there about the CMO working with all of those other people across the C-suite. What would you advise the CFO to do to strengthen their relationship with the CMO?
Understand what marketing is today. Work collaboratively with a CMO to set up a dashboard to define what good looks like. Understand what the CMO is trying to do.
Yeah.
And how it relates to the growth and value of the organization and pricing power and goodwill. The work that Chris Burgave is doing to help analysts understand the value of marketing, he's looking at pricing power, he's looking at goodwill, he's helping investors understand some metrics to value marketing, which really hasn't existed in the past. If you're interested, I'll give you some examples of what he's saying. So one is pricing power, how much tangible evidence the brand has pricing power. Is the marketing organization truly brand driven from a design perspective? Do they systematically track their customer satisfaction? We've been talking about NPS and value of the brand. Do they have a proprietary way of working marketing? Are they purpose driven? That's much more important today, that organizations are purpose driven, especially with millennials taking over from us completely. What kind of expertise does the marketing leadership team have? Do they have a clear value proposition to the market? And do they have a culture of excellence and innovation getting to the next level? I netted out to, are they a customer-led organization in their culture? I think that's what the CEO needs to engender, that the whole C-suite has a customer-led culture and the employees understand that. And that's the direction of organizations that are really successful, is that they serve customers and know how to do that.
So I'm the CFO. How do I make sure that my finance team has that customer-led?
It isn't always about short-term money. It's looking at the long-term relationships. So the finance team should understand that culture and be empowered to make trade-offs on short-term financial decisions if they feel it's going to contribute to long-term lifetime value of customers and keep customers happy. That's not always easy to do, but customers remember that. And it's the lifetime value, net revenue retention, and referring new customers that are going to drive the growth of the organization. So if you keep your customers happy and love you, if you love your customers, that's why Winning on Purpose is a great book for CFOs to read. I strongly recommend that. Fred Reichel's book on customer-led growth is great.
And let's face it, if you're part of the invoicing accounts receivable team within finance, you are a primary point of contact with the customer.
You are.
Therefore, how you respond to any requests from the customer for an invoice alteration, for a refund, for a credit,
Yep.
all of those things, you're having a direct impact on how the customer feels about you.
Absolutely. Every touch point with customers is really important.
Yeah.
In the overall experience.
Yeah.
And that overall experience drives long-term corporate value. So it's thinking long-term growth, long-term customer satisfaction, lifetime value, net retention, keeping your customers happy and loving customers, all functions in the organization. And that's part of having a customer culture.
Indeed. You mentioned in those 5 points originally, Alan, establish a common language. Having that common language right across the business must therefore be somewhat key to establishing that customer culture.
Yes. When I talk to CMOs, I say, don't use marketing speak, learn the business language.
Yeah.
Talk like the CFO and the CEO, speak the same language. There are a lot of, maybe arcane terms in marketing that not everybody's going to understand. So you keep that within marketing.
Yeah. Give me a few examples of those. What are the ones we ought to be avoiding?
Some of the web responses you get, geez, I'm trying to think off. There are a bunch when you're looking at people responding on your website and where they respond.
Yes. Alan, what would you advise the CFO to do who's got a maybe less than good relationship with the CMO? There's a rocky relationship there. There's been a little bit of conflict. What sort of things would you advise a CFO to do to improve that sort of relationship?
First of all, I'd meet once a month, try to sit down and break bread together and just begin to understand each other. I mean, if there's a rocky relationship, that's a real shame. When I started with Serious Decisions and Forrester, the first research piece I wrote was that relationship, CMO-CFO. So I think sitting down, really understanding each other, everybody has pressures. And it's hard, I imagine, with CFOs because they have to balance everyone's needs. And they have to say no. A lot of times when maybe they don't want to say no, but there's only so much budget. And the company has priorities. And this year you may want to invest more in product or customer success because of some issues, and less in marketing or more in marketing in some years. So I think it's always helpful for people to understand each other, sit down and have a conversation.
Understand.
And in that situation, probably face to face if they can.
Yeah. Understand why the thing that's causing conflict is so important to the other person.
Exactly.
I think there must be something in there to do with values, core values of individuals, that you need to understand what each person has at the core of their value for doing the job.
Exactly.
Yeah, almost.
Yeah. They're both trying to do their job. And the other thing that I've also found helpful is different personalities. I'm a big believer in Myers-Briggs. I've taken teams through that. And sometimes people don't get along because they're opposite personality types. Like, for example, I'm an ENTP. So I'm a big extrovert, intuitive, a thinker, a perceiver. An opposite personality type would be like an ISTJ.
Yeah.
Introvert, got to see something to believe it, thinker, and judgmental.
Yeah.
You put those two people in the same room, they have opposite personality types. And unless they understand that, it may be difficult to get along. But once you understand that and how different personality types can be very synergistic because they can help each other with blind spots, it's often difficult to get along because people are so different.
And I think that's the biggest use of Myers-Briggs, is not necessarily to understand where you are on the score, but to understand the other people that you're dealing with so that you can tailor the way you approach them appropriately.
Exactly. I think it's really valuable for both.
Another one that I like that is the disc profile. And I actually had on here an interesting guest who has turned the disc into 4 bird types, Merrick Rosenberg. And he defines eagles, who are typically the CEO in the business, wants the big picture, the 10,000 feet view, a lot of detail. Then there's the parrot, wants to chat about things a lot. I said, okay, you find most of your parrots in sales and marketing. They want to talk it through, they chat about it, whatever. Then you'll get the doves. And the doves are, oh, well, we'll have to make sure that everybody's all right in here. We'll have to look after
Yeah.
people also. They're mostly in HR.
Yeah.
Then you get the owls. They want all the detail. They know everything about it. They want to analyze it inside out. They want to be the wise old owl. And that's your CFO.
How interesting.
Huge stereotyping. And Merrick went on to say, well, nobody is purely one bird. They're usually a mixture of two.
Yeah.
But at the same time, understand if you can say, well, I know I'm going to talk to a parrot. Okay. I can't just give all the detail. I've got to chat around this a bit.
Yes.
But you're going to see the CEO. Well, I'm definitely not going to give the CEO the 20-page spreadsheet that I've put together about this. I want to give him figures. Right. That I thought was incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And I also, sometimes I take CMOs through. I work with a lot of private equity portfolio companies. So I work with CMOs and chief customer officers a lot. And I have a presentation that talks about how you present to a very senior person and team and what the advice on what to do and what not to do. How to share good news, how to share bad news, how to get consensus. It's a process.
Yeah, indeed.
Things to think about. So yeah. No, I love all this, whether it's Myers-Briggs, I'm very familiar with DISC. I've taken DISC. I'm very high on the D and then I drop off. I don't know. That's what I remember. There's signature themes. There's the one you mentioned. They're all, I think, very valuable.
Yeah. So in summer, in sort of closing down, if you are thinking about, could the CMO become a successful CFO or could the CFO become a successful CMO? Which would be the best, given you're coming into marketing from a finance background?
Well, I'm a person that was a finance person. I went into consulting, then I went into marketing research. I went into sales. I have some general management experience. I've been a P&L general manager. And I've also blogged on what makes a really good CMO. And I likened it to an orchestra conductor. You've got the jazz, which is the creative, and you have the classical, which is the analytical. And I believe CMOs have to be really good general managers. So you need to be able to balance the creative and the analytical together. Actually, I have that blog on my website, also at Demand Revenue. So if a CFO can get to the creative side, as well as they probably come from the analytical left brain side. If they can begin to appreciate the creative side and the breakthrough and making an emotional connection with customers and prospects, then I think a CFO can cross that bridge. If it's a CMO and they come from the creative side and have a lot of agency experience, they've got to learn the analytical side. So I think either could, depending on their personalities and their experience.
And actually, you referred to a report on your website. We've got a report on our website where we looked at the routes to CFO, and we took 500 CFOs and said, how did they get there? A surprisingly large number of them had some experience that was outside of the finance function.
Good.
It's some kind of sales or marketing type role. And actually, I think to be a really good CFO, you really have got to have a deep understanding of how the rest of the business works. And a good place to get it, I think, is within marketing.
Likewise for a CMO. Cross-functional experience is gold. It's really important to organizations. You can contribute so much more. I mean, now, I've been in finance and marketing and sales and general management, but it's very comfortable for me to speak to CFOs always. As a CMO, as a marketing person, I've had some CFOs tell me, geez, I never met a CMO that cared so much about customer growth and about net retention and about, but it's being a good business person, I think.
So the key lessons that I'm taking away here are be a good business person and understand the language of the other person.
Yes.
Alan, that has been fascinating. Thank you for being this week's guest on the Grow CFO Show.
Thank you, Kevin, for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it.